Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you for having us here today. You know, it's really not easy and it's not fun to speak to a big group, because this really isn't a good way to communicate. I talk, you listen, not much conversation taking place. So if you would, for the next few minutes, instead of you sitting in the bleachers and me standing on the stage, let's just make believe that I'm sitting down with you, I'm sitting in your living room, or we're sitting at your kitchen table, or maybe you've stopped by my office. I really want this to be more of a personal conversation than it is a lecture or a speech. Also, over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about drinking. I'm going to talk about being under the influence. I may say alcohol. I want you to know, though, that when I say that, I'm not just talking about alcohol. I'm talking about anything that might be intoxicating, anything that might impair your ability to drive, or your friend's ability to drive. It may be alcohol, it may be marijuana, it may be some other drug or narcotic, or it may even be some prescription drug that you're over-medicating yourself with. If you were there in my office, I'd probably begin by asking you, why do you think we do this? You know, this program that you've seen the last 2 days costs tens of thousands of dollars to put on. It takes thousands of hours of work. There are hundreds of people involved. Many of those people are volunteers who are coming down on their own time. Why do you think we do this? Why do people invest that time and money to put this program on for you? You see, the answer to that is because we know that students sitting in the bleacher today are going to be involved in the kind of incident that you've seen over the past 2 days. There are people sitting next to you in this room that are going to be arrested for driving under the influence. There are people sitting in this room that are going to be critically injured in alcohol-related accidents. Some of you sitting here today are going to be disfigured. Some of you are probably going to be permanently disabled. And there are people sitting here with you today that are going to die in alcohol-related accidents. And if that's shocking to you, what's even more shocking to us is that we know there are people sitting in the bleachers today that are involved in this kind of activity now in high school. And I think when I said that, there are probably names that came to your mind of people that you know that are drinking and driving, or using drugs and driving. In Huntington Beach, 10% of the arrests we make for people driving under the influence related charges are under the age of 21. Huntington Beach is consistently one of the safest cities in the United States when it comes to crime in our city. But for the last several years, every year, we've been one of the most unsafe cities in California when it comes to incidents of driving under the influence on our streets. My hope today is that you'll make 3 promises or commitments before you leave this room. The first one's fairly simple. I promise not to drink and drive. You know, that's a simple promise because it only involves you. It only takes your commitment to make that promise fulfilled. The second thing I'd like you to promise or make a commitment to, that I will not get in a car with someone who has been drinking. You know, that's a little bit tougher. But isn't it true when you think about the headlines you've read or the incidents you know about that it's often not the drunk driver, but the people in the car with them that are injured or killed? From the Orange County Register recently, a man who is suspected of driving drunk and lost control of his vehicle this morning, has been booked on suspicion of murder after his passenger was killed when he struck a concrete light pole. You don't have to drink and drive to be involved in one of these incidents. All you have to do is be afraid to tell your friend that you're not going to get in the car with them in a situation where they've been drinking. But really, today, how many of you have the nerve when that incident happens? It's late at night, you've been out with friends, you've been to a party, you've been drinking, your friend's driving. How many of you today have the nerve to look your friend in the face and say, I'm not going to get in the car with you? Do you think you have the nerve to get your cell phone and call your mother or father and say, come and get me? You see, I think if put to that test, many of you would be more concerned with what your friends would think of you than you are with the potential consequences of climbing in the back seat of that car to get a ride home with somebody who's not capable to drive. The third promise or commitment, and this one's even tougher, I will not let a friend drive when they have been drinking. There's another recent story out of the Orange County Register. A 20-year-old woman suspected of driving under the influence was charged today with one felony count of murder and the death of a 26-year-old in a high-speed car crash last month. The 26-year-old was on her way home from work, hadn't been drinking, hadn't been driving, hadn't been drinking, was driving safely, wasn't doing anything wrong, died in a crash with a drunk driver. And I would be willing to bet you that the 20-year-old had friends who saw her get in the car, who knew she had been drinking, but allowed her to drive away. If you allow a friend to drive who's impaired, and that friend becomes involved in one of these incidents, you share the responsibility for that accident. You share the responsibility for what happens to your friends. And you share the responsibility for what happens to any innocent third party.